Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning. I understand that yesterday you started with a robot, and I'm sorry that I have no robots today. I'm very interested, and it's a great privilege for me to be here, partly because a year ago I was involved in a project funded by the UK Foreign Office and the British Council, working with cities all across this region, a digital cities program, which was extraordinarily successful. And I do a lot of work with the Mayor of London. I'm the Creative Industries Ambassador for the Mayor. And I think the business of building relationships between cities right across the world is one of the key ways in which we can build a new digital and creative economy. But I wanted to talk very briefly about what do we mean by a digital economy. And I start with a little story. There's a very successful retail chain in the UK called John Lewis. It's one of the few retail stores that is increasing its profitability, while many others are suffering because of the impact of online shopping. And I asked the chief executive, how come your store is successful when so few others are? And he said, we didn't change anything, but I persuaded all my senior managers that rather than running a chain of stores with some online fulfillment, we're running a digital business with a few stores. And he said nothing changed except what was in the minds of those senior managers, and that's enabled us to build a different kind of company that's fit for the present. So I was thinking, when we talk about a digital economy, we make a number of assumptions, and some of them really may not be as solid as we like to think. So the first one would be a digital economy is, by definition, a high-tech, high-skill economy. But actually, the digital revolution is a general-purpose technology. It is an absolutely basic, fundamental shift in the same way that the wheel was. So it's not just having an impact on the high-skill areas of the economy. In fact, across the world, and I do a lot of work in Asia and Latin America and Africa, it's very often the simplest parts of the economy where the digital revolution can have the most impact. And I'm thinking of an initiative that some of you may be familiar with, M-Pesa, which started in Kenya, which allows people in Kenya to use their mobile phones as a means of exchanging money, buying goods, and selling goods. It sounds like a very basic, simple proposition, but it has transformed the Kenyan economy. It's added something like 25% to GDP in Kenya. And it's being used all over the world. I know that it's been implemented in parts of Albania and I think in Kosovo. But in Afghanistan, they began to use the M-Pesa system, transferring money by telephone, to pay the police. And one of the impacts of that was that it dramatically reduced corruption. So here is using digital technology for an absolutely basic purpose, but it is the kind of thing which can have a greater impact on an economy than focusing simply on what happens at the high-tech, high-skill end. And another example, I'm involved in a project in India where around 10,000 traditional craft artisans have been linked by smartphones. Most of them are illiterate, but they're highly skilled people. And by working together, by using image and sound, you don't need to be literate. They've created a business which is now doing deals with IKEA, the furniture store, worth $20 million, $50 million. So here is digital technology not driving the high end of the economy, but driving the most basic level of the economy. That's where the changes can happen. And that comes about not through the use of technology, but through creative thinking. I think a second assumption is that a digital economy will make us more competitive. That's true. But actually, I think the real impact of this digital revolution is that it makes collaboration possible in a completely different way. I mentioned the Digital Cities project that I was involved with the British Council, with 12 cities in this region last year. And one of the things that was most impressive about that was the collaboration that came out of it. Actually, collaboration between cities in this region, the mayors all talking to each other, but also collaboration between entrepreneurs in the West Balkans and entrepreneurs in the UK, which would not be possible without the use of digital technology. So collaboration, rather than competition, is one of the key things that can come out of this revolution. And I think it's something which is on a global scale, and it seems to me there's two significant issues to think about in that area. I was in Kazakhstan talking to the mayor of Astana, who's it's the capital city of Kazakhstan. And we were talking about this issue that it's cities that are now increasingly the drivers of economic change across the world. And he said, I completely agree with you. He said, I talk to my opposite number, the mayors in Abu Dhabi and Singapore every week because I have so much to learn from them. He said, I talk to the president of Kazakhstan once a month because I'm learning more from fellow mayors all around the world. Collaboration makes a different kind of economy possible. And in a region like this, where there are so many very, very creative, talented entrepreneurs, the program we did last year with Digital Cities, honestly, many of my colleagues from the UK were delighted and surprised by the quality of the commercial relationships they were able to build with entrepreneurs in this region. But in the online world, however good you are, it's very difficult to get profile. And it seems to me that in a region like this, where there's so much talent, but it's quite fragmented, it's not on a particularly big scale, to think about collaborating, thinking about entrepreneurs and businesses collaborating all across the region to raise their profile internationally would be a really important thing to do. So that's another area where our supposition about what a digital economy might look like may be a little incomplete. And then a third area. I think it's easy to think it's good for governments and industrial policy to embrace a digital economy because it's going to generate lots of jobs. That's true. But of course, what we also know is that it's destroying jobs at a massive scale. A big research project in the US in 2015 by Merrill Lynch for the Bank of America suggested that maybe 47% of present jobs in the US economy are likely to be lost in the next 20 years because of machine learning and artificial intelligence. There's a similar project done in the UK by Oxford Economics. 35% of jobs in the present UK economy likely to change. And what we know is that in manufacturing, when productivity increases in manufacturing almost anywhere in the world now, it's not as a result of more people working, it's a result of investment in technology. Employment in manufacturing on the whole is not rising. Employment in the service sectors is not rising. Employment in the retail sectors is not rising. So what are our kids going to do? We talk about a digital economy generating jobs, and it will, of course. All these major revolutions generate jobs, but it's also destroying jobs. And the chief economist of the Bank of England said recently, the space for human skills, uniquely human skills, is shrinking because of the advent of artificial intelligence. That's true, but actually, the space for creative thinking, for creativity, is expanding. And so one of the projects which I know was on show here yesterday is 21st Century Schools, which is teaching children in schools all across this region coding skills, but also, more importantly, teaching them how to think critically, how to think creatively, how to learn, and how to keep on learning. Because the one certainty is that whatever we do with digital technology, it's the way we use it and the creativity that we bring to it that is going to transform our economies. And analysis all around the world argues that the three areas that are least likely to suffer as a consequence of the growth of artificial intelligence are the creative industries, personal social care, and environmental technologies. But of those three, the creative industries, the ability to think creatively, is the crucial one because it's creative thinking which is transforming personal social care. It's creative thinking which is driving the environmental changes that we need for technology. So thinking creatively, fundamentally altering the way our education systems work is going to be a crucial part in making any kind of digital economy successful. And few education systems around the world are really embracing that at the scale and the speed that they need to. So the fact that there is in this region this 21st Century Schools project as an inspiration for teachers and for parents and for children is hugely important. And then a final point. I think we tend to think that the online platforms that we have access to, that we all feel that we have free access to, are a huge benefit to all of us in growing a digital economy. That's true. But if you think of the present big five, that's Alphabet, otherwise known as Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook. Between those five businesses, last year they generated $150 billion in profit. Good for them, not so good for the rest of us because they are draining money out of your advertising market. They're analyzing and have access to huge amounts of data about everything that is going on in your economy, in your society, and mine. And they also are able to manipulate, I'm not being paranoid about this, they are able to manipulate the way in which the products and services that your economy is producing is accessed online. And they are all completely private, unaccountable businesses. And that's before we get to Huawei and Tencent and Alibaba and the big Chinese platforms. So although it feels that this digital world is completely open and free to all of us, the key gates are owned by privately owned companies. And I was very struck that last week in The Economist magazine, I don't know if some of you know The Economist is a very authoritative magazine that's widely read, certainly in the US and through most of Europe. They said, who is leading the fight back against the power of the online platforms? This is a quote, if you want to understand where the world's most powerful industry is heading, look not to Washington or California, but to Brussels and Berlin. What a surprise, because they said the one entity in the world that is really thinking seriously about the consequences of this concentration of power is coming from the European Union. And the European Union has got the strength and the scale and the muscle to be able to address these questions in a way that demand attention from the big platforms. And they drew attention to the fact that it's on two particular areas. One is about protection of privacy, and one is about using the power of regulation to promote competition. So I think when we think about how we access the digital world in terms of economics and knowledge and social sharing, this issue of regulation, of being part of a bigger entity that is thinking seriously about what are the citizens' rights and the democratic rights of countries around the world, is a really serious issue. And so, in conclusion, I just say, when we think about a digital economy, and we think about the environmental challenges that we're all facing in the world today, we think about the demographic challenges that we're all facing, and that includes the prospect of very high levels of unemployment because of the impact of the fourth industrial revolution. If we think about the democratic challenges that we're facing today, it is absolutely the power of creative thinking that we need to drive this economy. If we're going to realize the real benefits of digitization. It's how we use it creatively. And I finish with two observations. One is, again from Andy Haldane, who is the chief economist at the Bank of England. He made a speech recently in which he said, in the UK, we must move from what we call a knowledge economy to a creative economy. And he said, the reason is knowledge is great for passing exams, but it's imagination that changes the world and drives innovation. And we can have an education system, we can have a society that values knowledge, but if we don't value creativity and imagination, then we're not going anywhere, and we will not realize the real impact that digital technology makes possible. And then my final thought was a mantra which you may have already heard. It's something I like very much. And that is, if oil was the fuel that drove the world's economy in the 20th century, it's creativity that will be the fuel that drives the world's economy in the 21st century. Creativity expressed through the arts and through the creative industries. And the difference between the two, of course, is that while the more oil we use, the less we have, and the more oil we use, the more damage we do to the planet, the more creativity you use, the more creativity you get. And the more creativity you unleash, the more we're able to solve the problems that we all face and are going to face in the next 20 years. So, in thinking about a digital economy, I think the real way to think about it is to say, we have to embrace the whole concept of a creative economy and creativity. And digital provides the underpinning tools that enable us to do that. So I hope that you have as successful a second day today as you obviously had yesterday. And thank you very much for listening to me.